Wonderful. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Allyson Gibson. I'm the coordinator with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. And today I am going to share with you some of Lancaster's story, what's happening with partnerships here in Lancaster County. Many of you are part of that, and so I'm eager to have you as part of the conversation as well. So I have this Clean and Clear by 2040 on here because we really anchor all of our work. All of our partnership work is anchored in that same common goal. So we're operating with a bias towards action. You can see some of the project work that's happening here with the Donegal Trout Unlimited and their buffer installations that are happening really all over the county. But I want to start with the description that you guys read because it's about being a good neighbor. From the municipal standpoint, we have many neighbors, and you all have to deal with neighbors that don't often get along with each other as neighbors, but we also have neighbors as municipal partners connected by water in many places. But being a neighbor, being a good neighbor, it can be a really difficult process. Collaboration, cooperation, coordination, all of these buzzwords really are things that we're trying to figure out how to do well. And moving from one to the next, kind of improving the version that we're doing as we move towards more collaboration. But what does that really mean? And so I'm going to share a couple of the examples here in Lancaster with you today, but I want to take us through that journey. And so we have to joke about all of this because we really are trying to be better about being good neighbors. But you guys, as municipal officials, you have all kinds of experience with neighbors and what's the reality on the ground. So I want to show you a graphic here to understand what I'm talking about as we're looking at what does it mean to cooperate, to coordinate, to collaborate, all of those buzzwords. Like I said, here's a quick definition. And I want to call your attention to the two components in the corners, because as we move along this collaboration continuum, it takes work and it takes an awareness to understand that when we're communicating with each other, for example, if we're talking between agencies or between partner organizations, that's one thing, but it's not the same as fully collaborating on a project, because as you do that, your trust has to increase. You're letting more people in. You're feeling like it's a safe space. You have created a sense of trust. You've worked together to create that sense of trust that opens the door. And when you do that, your turf is shrinking. So it's not like this is only my one little place that I'm working. When you're truly collaborating and you're growing the amount of trust, your turf is shrinking, and the collaboration itself is getting tighter. The work is getting tighter with that common mission. And as we're moving along this collaboration continuum, things are getting tighter and you have increased efficiency, you have better results. So I want to just anchor things in this example. And I'm going to take us to a Jamboard that I'm hoping you all can join in with as well. And I think if I put, I don't know if I can do it on, is there a way that I can give you guys a link in the chat? Can I do that to my
There should be able to just copy and paste it into the chat.
How do I get back to the chat?
It's up on the top, just to the right. So there's a.
Thank you. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm looking for you guys to participate here because I want to know to you all. Just click on that link in the chat and you'll be able to get to our group Jamboard here. And if you've never used Jamboard, you guys should still be able to see my screen here. If you click on this sticky note, it'll give you a sticky note. You can add a picture, you can add a shape. I want to know, how do you collaborate? So we've looked at that continuum, understanding a little bit more about the definitions. What does it mean to collaborate to you? So go ahead and click on this sticky note and you can add your own there. I'm looking for anything that makes it real for you. What does it look like to collaborate? Is it a specific skill? Do you have a specific incident that worked for you? Go ahead and add yours here so that we can see some other examples of what does collaboration really look like. We talk about partnerships, and that was one of the things we wanted to address in today's conversation. Anything that you all want to add, anything that comes to mind for what does collaboration really mean to you? I'm not seeing any sticky notes show up. Did anybody get a chance to try it? Oh, there we go. Working together towards a mutually beneficial goal. Great example. Yep. Anything else? Things that come to mind for how are you collaborating? I'm going to leave the link here. The web page will be open and we're going to come back to it. So as we move through our presentation, please feel free to continue adding to our Jamboard. The more examples on here, the more we'll be able to use it and we'll be able to come back and have some good pieces to talk about as we move through with the slides here. Thank you very much for those of you who have already been working on it. Sometimes it can feel like we're swimming in all of this information from MS4 to what does it mean to collaborate when people talk about boundaries, and does that look different in one watershed versus another, and how can we use the common goal of getting to clean and clear water. In Lancaster County, that's what we're working on. I started off with that first slide of clean and clear by 2040, and it can feel like so many different things that swirl around us, and what's our real role as we get sucked into this, because I know that so many of us are passionate about working towards clean water, but doing that in partnerships can feel really difficult. And so one example that I want to give about how you be better at partnerships and actually making collaboration come to life is being intentional about including as many different audiences as possible. DEIJ, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, is something that is really important for many of our communities so that it's an intentional process to get voices at the table, to reach parts of our community that need to be involved in clean water work, that need to have their needs addressed. And we can do that through some of our partnerships. So just stating it as an important element of your work in being a better partner, it helps take you steps forward. So I give that as one example of how partnerships, what they can look like, a step you can take to have a stronger partnership as you're moving towards that collaboration. Another example is leadership training, getting more of our community members to have the skills for both content. So in our case in Lancaster, we have a Watershed Leadership Academy. This is one example of how we're bringing along more partners. We're inviting more partners to be at the table, but they have to know what it means to be working in a watershed. What does it mean to do watershed planning? What does it mean to have MS4 layers on top of what your community layers are? So in Lancaster, we're working with Penn State to offer this kind of resource. The Watershed Leadership Academy gives our scholars both the watershed content as well as the hard skill training for leadership development. Some of that may be how to give better speeches. It may be about how to reach out to our economic leaders, to our legislative leaders, how to facilitate better conversations with landowners. So many different components of leadership training. It opens the door for more partnerships. So I encourage all of our community members, as we're looking at building the partnerships and strengthening them, look to our existing places like the Chamber, look to the Leadership Lancasters of the world, of each community. Those are some of the opportunities that you can invite and encourage your own staff and your own community members to participate in more often, and that will strengthen your partnerships. That will help you get further along on that collaboration continuum. Couple of pictures here that go along with it. It's got to be based in the field. It's got to be based in real world. And so even in COVID, we can be doing this in a way that's safe, that's comfortable, that uses the resources and the electronic access to content that we need at certain times, and then getting out in the field and still being real about the content at other times. So this is one example of how we're doing that here in Lancaster. I want to give a shout out to some of the partners in Lancaster from the municipal side who have been sharing their story, who've really been operating with that bias towards action. And I have a screenshot here of a YouTube video because I want to share it with you all to read later, but also because, or excuse me, to watch later, but also because this quote is so important, that our waters do not respect municipal boundaries. In fact, there often are our municipal boundaries. And so we have to work together. Our partners, we talked about initially being a good neighbor, and even across the creek, we can be a strong partner, a better neighbor. And how working together, what does that actually look like? That's what's in this YouTube video. And so I share with you this one example of a Lunch and Learn series that was hosted in the fall. And tomorrow morning, you all can hear more about it. I'm going to just show you two examples here. East Lampeter, West Lampeter, and Strasburg Borough came together to work on one project. It was a campground. Tara Hitchens and Charlie Hayes are going to be presenting details about this project tomorrow morning as part of this MS4 forum. So you'll get to hear more examples, what partnership looks like at the municipal level for one project that met all kinds of different permit requirements and reduction numbers, and how it factored in with the economics of what that private landowner needed as well. Mountjoy Township and Londonderry Township, two different counties, two different municipalities, all within one watershed, working on this really important, really large scale watershed restoration project that has lots of different BMPs. But the partnership that's there is because of a building of time. It's because of a common interest about clean and clear water while addressing the permitting requirements that are part of it as well. So you can watch this whole series for the Lunch and Learn, but also this one example, just calling out two great pieces where Lancaster partners with a municipal focus are operating with that bias towards action and really collaborating in a different way. It's kind of thinking on a different level. You still have to get down to the nitty gritty, and you still have to be able to take care of the needs on the ground. And these are two great examples I call out to where they are making that happen. Just a shout out for the stormwater series that we have this coming spring. So there's 4 different ones that are scheduled here. And again, I encourage you to keep learning as you are in this series with the EPA MS4 forum. We have some more that might help as well. So just a quick shout out for those 4 events coming up. I want to give a little bit of context of what I'm talking about here with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners and this idea of collaboration. What we're using is called the collective impact approach. And so we have a core group, a steering committee of 17 people, multi-sector representatives, but they're all working in collaboration towards that same common goal of clean and clear water. The stakeholders or the partners that are involved are unlimited. We welcome anybody who is involved in clean water work, and so grateful for the way that people have stepped up, have taken action, have participated in new ways, have really thought outside the box of how can we do this? If we need to find an result, we need to end with different results. We need to act in a different way. And so all of the partners participating here really are trying to think a little bit differently about collaboration. We keep saying, well, what does that actually look like? And that's what the difference is with some of these examples that we're calling out. The Lancaster Clean Water Partners are trying to pull that together in a coordinated way. So again, the efficiency is better. Things are tighter. People are communicating. The activities we're doing are mutually beneficial for each other. So those are a few pieces that are the essential elements of a collective impact approach. And the Clean Water Partners are using that with the common agenda, and that's the kind of the strategy or the plan that lays it out for us. We have this shared vision and mission, but the common agenda, it lays out how we're going to get there. Last year in 2020, we revised our common agenda, and the problem and the solution are pretty much the same. And we know, I'll show you that in just a second, but just want to outline the simple categories within the common agenda. The strategies are something that we all work on because of the priorities we've agreed upon. And so how you do that then will shape how close you get to your progress indicators. So for example, our problem is more than half of Lancaster County's 1,400 miles of stream are impaired. We know that Lancaster has this huge lift for reducing our nutrient and sediment loads to our local waters and then ultimately to the Chesapeake Bay. So the solution is to build and sustain the local multi-sector collaboration. We have a strong backbone organization. Myself and Emily Smedley are full-time staff for the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. We have a couple contractors that are in place for specific projects or for specific strategic pieces of that, but all working with this common agenda towards a shared result. So an example of what the priorities look like, we know that there are BMPs that have to be put in the ground if we're going to see these water quality improvements. We have to make sure that they match up with the countywide action plan. We were invited by DEP to write the countywide action plan. That includes things like the MS4 projects, that includes ag projects, that includes everything that can get credit within the Bay model. But we know that some of those BMPs are better fit for certain places. We know that there's momentum happening with watershed associations. And so making sure the funding lines up, making sure the permitting pieces are in place, how can we increase the efficiency because of the collaboration to address the CAP goals and putting the BMPs in place that make the most sense. These are a few examples. Green infrastructure, perfect example of how it makes economic sense. It's what the community needs, and there are certain places that it's going to be a better fit. Ag practices, you can see one there in the middle. We know that in Lancaster County, there are so many unique places where the ag land use intersects with the urban and suburban land use. And so addressing what the current needs are in those specific locations, that's going to help us determine what the BMPs are and then what the funding options are. And making sure that because everybody is working together in a different and elevated way, that collaboration is building the momentum so that then you can continue doing maintenance. You can continue spreading the word and then showing more and more landowners that this is a community effort, that collaboration really requires everybody's participation. And when we're all working towards that same goal, it's even easier. So our progress indicators, I mentioned that that's what we're all working towards in the end. And our CAP numbers, in Lancaster's case, our progress indicators for the Lancaster Clean Water Partners are also our CAP numbers. So again, everything that goes in the ground it gets credit. We want to make sure it's counted. We want to make sure that it's part of Lancaster's clean water story, and it's getting us closer to these big goals. This includes things like nutrient and sediment reductions, but we're also trying to get our local streams off the impaired list. It's important to make something real, make something tangible for our community members. And so while they may not be able to understand what nitrogen and phosphorus and all the chemical reactions and freestone, limestone, all those pieces of the IBI score, taking things off of an impaired list because the water's healthy again, because I can drink the water coming out of my tap and it doesn't cost me as much from a water treatment side. Those are some of the real pieces about translation that we want to make sure are part of our own outreach strategy. And that then translates to more people being active and supportive of the local issues. Just a reminder to everyone and a reality check for us is that Lancaster, you can see the big bar at the top. We have to reach about 11 million pounds. That's our reduction goal for our CAP. We know that the ag sector is one big opportunity. There are some creative ways that the MS4 community, like I said, interacts and intersects with the ag community. And so when DEP puts out collaboration as one of their focus areas, that's a fantastic door that's open. There are some unique opportunities, and we want to take advantage of those that exist because we said that agencies and organizations and individuals and landowners, they all have to collaborate. And so, again, the buzzwords can get distracting, but it's so important to take it to reality and say, well, this is what it's going to look like. And so collaboration for us is working with DEP, is taking some of these opportunities where we know that we have these best management practice opportunities, but here's the reality. You guys who are doing MS4 installation and management for your clients or your municipalities, These are the kinds of documents that we want to make sure we're up to date with, that we know what the options are, that we're putting some options in front of our landowners, in front of our own municipal boards, in front of our own DEP partners. How can we use these great opportunities like putting practices in the urban area or within that 1 mile range? That's what's going to help us get closer to our goals. Still focusing on those CAP goals. How can we do that? And we know that it's going to take some horsepower. So we thank DEP for their support for things like the CAP coordinator team. We have 3 people that are forming our team here in Lancaster for the CAP coordination. And so I give this as another example where collaboration, it means that we cooperate together. It means that our partnerships strengthen the overall effort. So these 3 groups, I'm so thankful for Land Studies, the Lancaster Farmland Trust, and David Miller Associates, because their work together is strengthening our CAP implementation efforts, which gets us closer to our common goal of clean and clear. A quick snapshot of what that actually looks like on the ground here. Here are a couple examples, and you can see the list there of the names of the locations, but a couple photos just to go along with it. Worth at Hollow Farm is in southern Lancaster County. They worked with NRCS, and they also worked with some of our CAP implementation dollars to get buffers planted, to get some stream bank stabilization done, and a cattle crossing in there as well. Colleton Park in Lancaster City is a great example of a project that has been in the works for a long time. It's a big infrastructure change, but they also included some of the public art, some of the public recreation, native plantings, rain gardens, picnic tables that have checkerboards on them. There are multilingual elements that are part of this project as well. So a few examples of how collaborating with local artists, of working with green infrastructure priorities that the city might have, and also working with different communities around the city that have specific interests in how to use this kind of space. So I call these out as a few examples of what CAP implementation looks like for us. And I feel like these projects, the collaboration is there, and I know that we can, and we are already planning how to grow that collaboration, how to increase the number of partners, how to elevate the stories so that more and more people want to be part of this partnership and the growing collaboration. Our countywide action plan, just a link here that you all can look at later, but we encourage all of our partners to use this tool. It can help everyone prioritize their efforts. If we're all working from the same sheet of music, then we can refer back to that list of BMPs. And it makes sense for some people to take on, to incorporate, to integrate some of the BMPs and not others. And that's okay. And that's why it is a collaborative effort. But relying on our CAP coordinator team and the Clean Water Partners in that lead role, working with the Lancaster County Conservation District as well, is a key element of how we're making that all kind of come to life here in Lancaster. One example, I think this is so unique that you have to be culturally and community oriented, where using drag lines to inject dairy manure totally makes sense in certain places. In Lancaster County with our plain sect farmers, one of the ways that the County Conservation District is looking at it in a creative way to add the applicability to this project is to make a horse-drawn version. So they're working with a local machinery company to build a horse-drawn version so that this best management practice, where it makes sense, where it's already being used, we can expand the interest and the rate that this kind of work can be done. Also an example of a buffer, well-maintained buffer, installing these in so many different places from the municipal level to ag land to private properties. These are huge for nutrient and sediment reductions, but also understanding the maintenance that has to go with it, calling that out in the plan, and then lining up the partners that are ready and willing and the dollars that go with it to ensure that it stays in that well-maintained status. So a quick snapshot about looking at watersheds. We talked earlier about knowing our boundaries and not always operating within the boundaries we typically think of. So thinking of things like a watershed, that has formed our 2021 goals. And that ranges from the Lancaster Clean Water Partners the whole way through the CAP coordinator, through many different individual organizations. So using a stream delisting strategy, that's what serves as our anchor here, because we want to look at the small catchments and what makes sense to do in that small catchment that's going to take that stream off the impaired list. We may have to look upland a lot farther. We may have to look at buffers. We may have to look at stormwater and ag practices and so many different other components, but we have to start in that small catchment. Still thinking like a watershed of how are you going to address upland pieces because it is concentrating within the watershed. Those all have to be on the table as part of the conversation. So these are a few of the things that translate, or the simplified version for our 2021 goals and what that looks like on the ground. And so I bring it back to where we started with that collaboration continuum. And I encourage you all to think about, how do I start to operate more towards this collaboration, integration end of the spectrum? We have to communicate with each other. We have to cooperate in new and creative ways. But if we're really going to push ourselves to get better results, partnerships require collaboration, longer term interaction. And the decisions that we make are going to help get us there. We have to work with each other to do that. And so I want to bring it back to this because it's so important for us to understand that it takes time. This is not an overnight process. Building trust is a huge effort. And thinking about our turf shrinking is not something that can be easy. So I encourage all of us to work together and understand that it does take time. I'm going to go back to our Jamboard here and see if we have any other examples that people have added to our list of what does collaboration actually look like for you. And I encourage you to keep adding them here. Because it's in the chat, you can always come back to it and keep adding, keep looking. So thank you. Offering concrete examples for discussion. Working with neighboring municipalities. Yep. Working with a common person. Finding who that leader can be within all of those different groups. That's a great example. Yep. Yep. Thank you to those of you who added to our Jamboard. I encourage you to keep coming back to that. If it's helpful to use it for further ideas that might come to mind. So I want to make sure we have time here at the end for some question and answer, for some conversation, and hear from you all as well. In the slides here, which I think you guys will get at the end, there's contact information for myself, Emily, and John Cox. And we are happy to continue the conversation about what collaboration has looked like in Lancaster. Partnerships are growing and changing all the time. And I am grateful for the chance to share that with you all today. So I'm going to turn it back to you for questions that may have come up.
Thank you, Allyson. Yeah. If you have questions, please put those in the chat, or if you'd like to ask your question, go ahead and raise your hand so we don't have too many people jumping in at once. Okay.
Jason, I know today's session was recorded. Is there any way that would be most helpful for me to get resources to either the attendees or others that might be interested?
I believe the recordings will be posted at some point. Liz might know the answer to that better than I do, but I believe the recordings will be posted. So I think any resources that we want to send out to the group could also be posted on the website.
Yes, it'll be posted on the website, all the recordings from today and tomorrow. So we will definitely be able to share information.
Okay. I know sometimes it can be hard to come up with questions right away or putting them in the chat, so I'm happy to share things later on.
Okay, we can give it a few more minutes. I think we have about 9 minutes before we're due back to the main session to wrap up the day.
Hey, this is Michelle. I'm just jumping in. I have a question, but I don't think my chat is popping up quickly enough. And that is, do you have tips, Allyson, for virtual collaboration, like certain platforms that you think work better?
So we use Google Drive for things like documents and Excel sheets and that kind of thing. If when you're working together and you just need to not send versions of Word documents back and forth, that's been especially helpful. I think that things like Jamboard, there are project management tools like Asana or Monday.com that I've used for specific projects, but for collaborating on documents themselves, our team has mostly used Google for those. And then you can always have varying levels of who can be an editor and who can be a viewer only.
Great, thank you.
Do you have a question in the chat now? It's what suggestions have you found helpful to explaining the benefits from losing turf to gain trust and collaboration to municipalities?
So I would say that a lot of it is about understanding what the local needs are and respecting things like when it's related to a permit, when you want to work on water quality, but they're looking at things, and they being either party is looking at things just from a budget standpoint or just from a permit standpoint. It's got to be about what the local needs are. Are there cultural components there? Are there economic development components? Are there public health components? So I think factoring in and listening a lot is a big piece of that. Understanding it can't happen in one conversation, understanding that you may have to have a phone call and an individual meeting and an individual event in the field, kind of being open to different forms of communication. But I think explaining, to directly answer your question about explaining the benefits, is that it is a community effort. When we look at something like delisting a stream, we're not just talking about one specific parcel or one specific project. We're talking to the entire community about this is a community effort. Everybody along this stretch of stream is going to be working towards the same goal. And so it's not about losing my own turf or my own project needs, but it's about the collaboration for the bigger result. There's also a really great book that we've used in our watershed leadership class, is The Speed of Trust. And this gives some examples like waves of layers of trust and how you get there, and some other really great real world examples if you need some more information.
Okay. Have any other questions for Allyson? Okay, well, I'll just remind everyone again that you should be receiving a link to a survey if you haven't already. So I think for each session and then the program overall. Oh, here we go. We have another question. Allyson, do you see the chat? Do you need me to read it? Okay.
Yep.
So I can read it for the group, others who aren't seeing it. So the question is, we're in our first round of MS4 compliance. I find it hard to wrap my head around getting our goals established. It seems like we need to know our goals first before we compare them with a neighboring municipality. Any suggestions on getting started?
I would say that your engineer is probably going to have some suggestions of places to start, but I would say that opening and having a conversation with neighboring municipalities would also be a great place to start. Just find out what their local priorities are. Like if they have projects already identified that are on a stream that borders you, then maybe it makes sense to do both sides of the stream and that would fit what your MS4 needs are as well. I think there's going to be parts of the watershed within your MS4 that are going to be a bigger priority because of either the loading or changes in land use, and those are things that the calculations and engineers can tell you specifically. But I think being in open conversation, being in a place that the trust is there, you can reach out to your neighboring municipalities on all sides from the very beginning is going to help as you create your own goals moving forward. Yeah.